Hello, everyone. Welcome to a new episode of the Florida Sound Archive podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Kaiser. And for today's episode, I have on with me a very special guest. I am pleased to welcome John Urban. He has been in some bands in the Tampa area. Two in particular stand out to me personally, and I'm excited to get into them, as well as other things he's done in his journey. That would be Brat and also Urban Vault. John, welcome into the podcast. It's great to have you.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here.
So, John, we have to get to real quickly your background because you are the first guest to have Bigfoots behind you. So can you just give us a quick snapshot into the story behind the Bigfoots?
Bigfoot is the thing I've always interested in since I was a child. I was always fascinated by them. And so I'm a pretty good illustrator. And I was a professional caricature artist for Busch Gardens and the zoo in Tampa and the Florida Aquarium and all these things. So I'm good at doing line art and illustrations. And like I said, I don't know if you can see that. Here's one of them. But anyway, I love Bigfoot. So I started drawing these Bigfoot drawings, and there's these, Facebook Bigfoot pages, and I post my drawings and I get 100 likes, and people say, "Oh, that's great. You should make a Bigfoot coloring book." So I've released 2 books that's available on Amazon. One is a Bigfoot coloring book, but it's not like a Barney happy big cover. It's more aggressive and scary. And then I recently did a remake. Well, I got props. I don't know if you can see it. Here's my Bigfoot coloring book. It's got 2 Bigfoot fighting in there. And then kind of just for fun, the story of Goldilocks and the 3 Bears, the nursery rhyme, I got Goldilocks and the 3 Bigfoot.
Nice.
And it's an illustrated fairy tale book where she goes in a cave, this Bigfoot and everything. So, but anyway, that's kind
great.
of thing. I go to Bigfoot conventions. In my books, I'm in like about 5 big Bigfoot museums. I mean, there's the Cliff Brockman knows I'm finding Bigfoot. He has one in Oregon. In Maine, they have the International Cryptozoology Museum. I'm in there. So there's one in Oklahoma, the Oklahoma Bigfoot Museum, and in the Everglades, they have the Skunk Cave Research Center. I'm in there. So, that's my new thing right now is Bigfoot. Not really a new thing, but it just says what I do.
That's very neat. Well, thank you for giving us that snapshot into your passion for Bigfoot and also what you've been doing there as well. So we're going to take a trip, though, down memory lane and revisit some of your early beginnings. So where did you grow up, John?
Okay. Well, it's basically my dad worked for the Sherwin-Williams Paint Company. He was like a big credit manager, and they're based in Cleveland. So I was born in Cleveland, Ohio. And I was there at like 6th grade. Then my dad got transferred to Chicago, Illinois. So I was there through like first year of high school. Then we got moved back to Cleveland. So I was there in Cleveland, Ohio, so I graduated high school. And then from there, I moved to Tampa in like 1981.
What was it like to you when you first arrived in Florida compared to living in Cleveland?
Because Cleveland, believe it or not, Cleveland had a really good metal scene. I saw Iron Maiden, I couldn't say original, it's the second album, they switched guitar players. But I saw Iron Maiden back then, Paul Di'Anno and Clyde Burr play at the Killer Store, playing a bar in Cleveland, so I just love metal. And I thought I was going to go to Florida, it's all going to be Lynyrd Skynyrd and Tom Petty, But I moved to a suburb of Tampa, Florida called Brandon. There's all these heavy metal kids. And I go in this record store that had all these heavy metal bands and stuff. And then, have you heard of Nasty Savage?
Of course.
Okay. Well, they're good friends of mine. I actually auditioned for them one time. There's a funny story there. I didn't make it. That was kind of my own arrogance there. Well, long story short, I went to audition. They knew me. They saw me play. We were friends. They made me audition. I learned like the 5 songs. They're like, "Okay, sounds good. Why don't you learn some more songs and come back? We got to look at some other guys." But I'm like, "Well, here's the deal. If you want to look audition all the other guys, audition them. And then if you still want me to come, I'll learn the songs. But don't ask me to learn the whole repertoire if I'm not in the band." They didn't. I guess they thought that was, kind of arrogant, So basically, I didn't dance. I didn't kiss their, And I'm like, if you want me, I'm in. But I'm not gonna learn the songs. Listen in the band. That probably wasn't good. They were a little too thrash for me. That's why I really, But anyway, regardless,
did you see them though at like a local club to get some exposure?
Yeah.
Where did you see them for the first time?
Oh gosh. Well, in Brandon, there is a small club called the Brandon Pub that they would play there, and there's a great club that Brat played at called the London Victory Club. And it's cool. It's actually a posh place. but they had all sorts of bands play there, but most nice places wouldn't let metal bands play there. But they had a big floor, and on the building, they just had like kind of a wraparound balcony. And they had like the on each side of the stage, they had these kind of revolving staircases and stuff. But I saw them play there. And the thing is, most of the nicer clubs back in the early 80s, that's the hair bands were the big thing. And a lot of the clubs, they would have the professional A circuit bands playing there, and they're playing all the danceable rock songs and stuff. So usually bands like Brat, we can only play at places on like Sunday nights or Wednesdays, on the off nights. But there's some metal clubs, and they're usually smaller in dives, but they're great. There's a place called Ruby's. There's one called the Brass Mug, which is still around. I mean, yes, everyone from the Ramones to Nirvana played there. But there's a Sunset Club. They have these, small diving bars. But I'd go see them all the time because I love the headbanging and everything. And so I go there, and there's like a poorly drawn flyer with some metal guy with studs and everything saying, "Oh, there's a heavy metal concert, Nasty Savage." And I'm like, "Really? Okay." It was a cow pasture in the middle of Brandon. It was cows walking around, and they erected a stage, and there they are. And Nasty Ronnie, Ron Galletti is a good friend of mine. He's the singer. And he was like the Muhammad Ali of metal. He was, "Oh, this is a move." And he would do all these wrestling moves. He'd break TVs on his head. His blood would be coming down, real blood. And he had the studs and leather. He used to be kind of bodybuilder. He's kind of this godly looking guy. And I'm seeing all these metal guys and all the kids dressed in, I couldn't believe it. I was like in heaven, like, "Oh my God, this is Florida." And then, just Florida became the place. But like, Savatage was huge here, Nasty Savage. And then the death metal community came in.
Right.
I mean, they weren't all from Tampa. They got big. They had Morbid Angel and Obituary, and
it really blew up in that area where it became the death metal capital of the world.
Yeah, that was a little bit after me, because because I was in Brat in the early '80s. So honestly, I would say Brat was one of the groundbreaking bands that we promoted and headlined our own shows. So you had Savatage and Brat and stuff, and even Nasty Savage's first album was more Priest-like. I wouldn't call it melodic rock. You know what I mean? Straight ahead rock. They started getting thrash after that. And that's, but after I kind of bowed out gracefully, that's, I want to say it started out with Death, but Obituary, these used to be called Executioner. They became huge. And then just about every death metal band in Florida, here's a record contract,
Sure. Yeah.
We got known for the death metal.
I want to go back to your early beginnings when it came to picking up an instrument, because you're a bass player. So what made you decide to even pick up a bass?
Well, that's one thing I kind of take pride in, is that, okay, a lot of it had to do, as far as my mother really inspired me, because I was the third son. And my mother, she played piano and she played trumpet in elementary school, and she was in the plays and she was a cheerleader and all that stuff. And my two other brothers had no interest at all in playing the music. So I was their last shot. And so I started playing trumpet kind of just to please her. But playing trumpet, first off, who wants to play trumpet? I mean, Chuck Manchi's dead now. It's like, it was not my thing. And you got three valves. It's hard. It takes a lot of wind down. I was never good at it. But I did it just to please my mom. And then it happened. I don't know, when I was like sixth grade or so, Kiss played on the Paul Lynde Halloween TV special. For some reason, Paul Lynde, I don't know if you remember him, got in Hollywood Squares.
Of course, and that's one of the greatest Halloween specials of all time.
Oh my gosh, well, they had Witchy Poo from H.R. Puff and stuff, and the witch from the Wizard of Oz and everything. But Kiss was on there, played 3 or 4 songs, and I was just like, oh my God, because I was a weird kid in the sense my two other brothers into sports. I had nothing to do with sports, thought the ball was going to put my eye out. But my main thing is I get bored, all the rules and regulations. I mean, I can watch Roman Gladiators, or I can watch Quidditch on Harry Potter all day long. I can watch Rocky movies, not real boxing. It's too boring. But yeah, real sports, I'm just bored. There's, so I was into I really love apes and gorillas, which led me to the Bigfoot thing. I love apes and monkeys. I love horror movies, like the old Universal. And I love monsters with vampires. So Gene Simmons, he had the medieval armor. He looked like a vampire. He spit blood, breathed fire. When I was a kid, that was the coolest thing I've ever seen, and pretty much the coolest thing I've seen since then. And then, they all had their personalities, the spaceman. And I was just, I don't know. It's just like when people talk about seeing Elvis and the Beatles, the Kiss were my Elvis and Beatles. And I wanted to be a bass player just like Gene Simmons. Now, so that's the interesting thing about it, is that 90% of bass players are frustrated guitar players. Because it's easier to get in a band if you're a bass player. These guitar players, either they're not good, they have trouble, So most of them aren't really into it. So I'm a bass player. And when you're a proper bass player, you work with a drummer. You're not trying to show off. You're not trying to impress everybody. It's a different mindset to be a proper bass player. So I was a bass player. I didn't start playing. Still can't play guitar. And so that's the thing. I was really, I got into it with Gene Simmons, but basically the early bass players like Thin Lizzy, filling out of Thin Lizzy, was a great bass player at the time. Now because of the makeup, I got into Alice Cooper and their original, because he originally had a band for the first several albums, then he went solo.
Right.
But their bass player, Dennis Dunaway, had some great melodic bass lines. A lot of it sounded like Iron Maiden. But, then, of course, Black Sabbath, I was talking about Ozzy, passed away. But Geezer Butler was a great bassist. He's a very underrated bass player. And then UFO had Pete Wade, which is a cool guy with a driving bass player. That was more image and stuff. So all those are the guys that really I emulated.
How old were you when you came to Tampa?
I just graduated high school. So it's funny you said that, because I remember I was just turning 19. Because when I was in Cleveland, back then they had a thing where with beer, when you turned 18, they had low alcohol beer. And so you're allowed to go to bars when you're 18. So I started going to bars when I was 18. Then like I said, I joined a professional cover band. I was playing in high school. And I was the third son. My parents were really strict on my first two sons. Then when I came time with me, they retired. My dad was doing pretty well. Here's $20 and go somewhere. And so I got away with murder. So I'd be on a Wednesday night playing till 2:00 in the morning, come home drunk and go to school next day. My brothers, and I had the long hair. My brother's like, how are you getting away with this? But yeah, I graduated.
How were you getting away with that, John?
I don't know. I have no idea. My parents are
That's wild for that age.
I know. It was great. And because that's the whole thing, because basically, another thing I'm surprised is that when you go to school, you get all these credits, you need so many credits to graduate. So I took all these credits. So by the time I became a senior, I had almost all the credits I needed to graduate. So I only went to class from like 8 to maybe 11 o'clock in the morning. And I can't believe my parents, well, okay, you really should take more, classes. And so I was able to get a job at a local movie theater at the mall. And because all the kids were working, they needed someone to rip tickets during the day. That was me. And there's a guy there named Joseph Vargo, who now is a big fantasy artist. He does all these vampires and gargoyles and stuff. He's kind of famous as an artist. But he was an usher there, and he was older. So I was like, not just about to turn 18. He was like in his early 20s. So he was like the Fonzie, he got me weird leather jacket. I'd hang out with him, and he had the car with the flames on the hood. And got to me, I became like instantly cool hanging out with him. Well, he was the singer of this band Virgin Steel that I joined in high school. So that's when I started playing in bands. But when I moved to Florida, the drinking age was 19, but you could drink anything. So I was like 3 or 4 months, from being able to go to bars. And then once I turned 18, then I went crazy. So, but that was like so great, because in Tampa, they had these big clubs. They're not quite as big as supermarkets, really big clubs. And they had them like in Tampa, there's the Mark Twain bar. And then in St. Petersburg, they had the 49th Street Mining Company. And Clearwater, they had the Club 19. Then you could go to these bars any night. Tuesday, Wednesday, it'd be packed. There'll be hot girls. They had these good bands. So, that's the whole thing. The early 80s scene was so great because the drinking age was just 19. There's more people. Most of the kids are still living at home. They got money. They don't care. They're out there partying.
Let's take a moment, if we can, to just walk through some of these clubs of the past, because you mentioned a few of them. And I know there were a lot of shows at some of these places. So one of them you mentioned was Club 19. Now, was the name also Mr. T's Club 19?
How did you know that? Wow. Yeah, I was going to say that. Yeah, that's the same club.
Yeah, so let's walk through that one first. For those that have never stepped foot in there or even know about it, what was it like walking into Club 19?
Okay, well, when you first walked in, there was a quiet bar there. And then you walked in, it's a big, huge room. They had a big stage. And it was right in the same little mini mall as a Peaches record store. I could spend hours in Peaches record store, so I love that. But there's mostly what they call an A circuit cover bands. And back then, it's more the hair band, glam type bands playing there and stuff. But every now and then, they'd have a national band. I did see Kix play there, Kix. They're one
Yeah,
of
I
my
think
favorite
they're from
bands.
Maryland.
Yeah, yeah. I saw them several times. So they didn't have a lot of national bands. That was like the place to go in Clearwater.
Did any
And then
local bands stand out to you at that time that you were catching?
um, probably the big band, there's a band called Lefty. And did you ever, is there was a band called Juliet? I don't know, you may not have
I
heard of
don't
them.
know if I've heard of them.
Okay.
No.
Well, there's this guy named Kenny McGee that I'm friends with. We actually did a acoustic duo, but this band Lefty was the big band,
I
all the
have heard
girls
of the
loved.
band Lefty. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Well, Kenny McGee was in this band Lefty. And but then he joined a band called Juliet that Kevin DeBro of Quiet Riot was producing their album. So they moved out to LA and they ended up getting signed. But the big band at the time was called Stranger. Do you ever hear of Stranger?
Yes.
Yeah, they were kind of Tampa's version of Van Halen. They had really good looking guitar player, the hair and everything, and the singer had long hair. And I really think they should have made it. They were on Epic Records. They did one record. It didn't do very well. They weren't really promoted that well. And theoretically, they recorded the second album, but the label didn't release it. So they came back to Tampa and they just started making their own record label. I think it's called Thunder Bay Records, I believe. And so they apparently, did quite well touring and making their own records and stuff. They did that for years and years. So, but those are Stranger was like the bigger band. The Lefty was the bigger bands I can think of.
Did any of the
There's a
bands?
band called Argus. I'm sorry, Argus was the only band that got away with playing metal. I mean, they would go there, and I'm not talking playing breaking the law or like the Happy, I'm talking about straight up European metal. So yeah, Argus was like another big band.
Did any of your bands get a chance to perform at Club 19?
Yeah, yeah. When I was in Brat, the funny thing is you mentioned that was one of the clubs we played at a lot because I tended to book most of the gigs, but our singer started dating one of the waitresses there, and then suddenly we started playing there all the time. But yeah, we played there, and like I said, it was a really big stage. So yeah, I love playing that. It was a great bar.
Very, very cool. And another place you mentioned, which I know also had another name later. You mentioned Mark Twain's, which I believe became the Tampa Bay Power Club.
Yeah, that was like the big club to go to at the time, probably the biggest. And I just found out recently, I don't even remember it. I never knew why they called it Mark Twain's. Originally, it was a disco called the Mark Twain's Riverboat Disco. And I don't even remember that. But then it became a rock club. They just shortened it to Mark Twain's. And then later on, I don't know why they did it because Mark Twain's such a big name, but they changed it to the electric, or what was it, the power company? Is that what you said?
Right.
Yeah, the power company. So that's when we played there. But there was a band there that became the house band. And so the same band played the week after week after week. Pretty well. They were a great band. Stormbringer. Thank you. Stormbringer. They were the house band. And so, but on the weekends, they let other bands play. So we would get to play there like on Sunday nights or something.
Was it mostly original bands or was it a lot of cover bands?
No, it's mostly cover. It was kind of hard for original bands to play. Because really, every now and then, well, there's another club I think we was talking a little bit before. Right in downtown Tampa, there's a club called the London Victory Club. And they had all sorts of acts and comedians and all these type of things. But it was a huge venue, and it's kind of fancy. They had a big main floor, and upstairs they had kind of like a balcony that wrapped around it. And on each side of the stage had a revolving staircase that went up. It was a really cool place. So they would let, like Savatage and Nancy Savage and Brat play there. But most of the clubs that would let metal were like the divey type clubs. They were there's one called the Brass Mug that's still in existence. And like I said, everyone from the Ramones to Nirvana played there. But then there's a band called Rubies. And then another one, I think it was called the Sunset Strip or something.
The Sunset
Club.
There's
some smaller Sunset Club. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's where the metal bands play there.
Yeah.
I was kind of bad. I had my several places I go and people I know would go there. So I didn't go to all of them.
Yeah. I know there was also places like the Ritz, the Rocket
Yeah.
Club.
Well, the Ritz is now the thing about the Ritz, sometimes they call it the Ritz Theater. And back in the old days, they had chairs but it's like an old fashioned theater. It's very cool. They had a balcony So I got to play there several times. They had a big green room. And one time I was in a cover band, and you ever hear of Mini Kiss, the little people that dress like Kiss?
I
It's
think
in
I
the
have.
commercials.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, the Kiss kind of endorses them. They make commercials with Dr. Pepper and all that stuff. And so Mini Kiss was playing. They're going to have like 4 or 5 bands open, and every band is supposed to learn 3 Kiss songs. And we're the only band that did. Some of the other bands would learn like maybe 1. So I wasn't the lead singer, but our lead singer did Rock and Roll Night, which we happened to do. But we ended up learning Cold Gin and Strutter, and they let me sing that. And I had this little mask that had the Gene Simmons makeup painted on. But it's so funny because we go there in the green room. I'm one of these guys, a stickler about tuning my bass, make sure everything works. So always before I go to the room, I go to the backstage area and I'm tuning my bass. So I go in there in the green room, it's real big, and I'm messing with my bass. All of a sudden, the Mini Kiss guys came in, these little people. They come in and I'm like, they thought, oh yeah, I was going to leave. Oh no, you're good, stay here. And then they come in with cases of Heineken. And they had this one woman that was a dominatrix as part of their show for some reason. And then they go lock the door, and the rest of the guys in my band trying to go in, they wouldn't let them in. They let me stay because I was already in there. I had squatter rights. But I'm there at one point, they're giving me Heineken, and I'm on the couch with Doors and Kiss makeup and a hot blonde DM dominatrix. I mean, I could die now. It's the best gig ever. But the reason I brought that up is so
I see
funny.
why that stands in your memory.
Oh
there,
my
Sean.
God. But yeah, and that night they closed the balcony, and they had the security guards blocking off the balcony. So I'm up there singing Kiss songs with a Gene Simmons mask, and supposedly my manager told me the balcony was reserved because Gene Simmons was there, and so I'm over there singing Cold Gin and Strutter when Gene Simmons, so maybe I performed it for Gene Simmons. I don't know. But
There you go.
That's my story.
That is a good one. So let's talk about the origins of Brat, because I know Brad had played a lot of these different places that we're talking about, and Brat had their name, I imagine, before you joined. Is that correct?
Not really. Basically, I was into metal because when I was in a cover band in Cleveland, I mean, not metal, but I mean, we did a whole set of AC/DC. We did a bunch of Judas Priest, a bunch of Van Halen, that type, more hard rock / metal. And that's what I loved. And when I was going and looking for a band in Cleveland, I was looking for a hard rock or metal band. And I couldn't find one. Then all of a sudden, because I lived in Tampa, I was in Clearwater, there's this band. Now, at the time I joined them, they were called Cinderella. Now, this is before Cinderella, of course. And so I go out there, and a bunch of cool guys, they had a Puerto Rican singer with the dreadlocks and all this stuff, and a really good band, and they had really good originals. But the original Brat songs were kind of more commercial, because we mentioned Kicks before. I would compare them to like Cheap Trick or Kicks. They're really poppy. All the songs about boy meets girl, boy loses girl, boy cheats on girl, all about that. But I just really liked the band. I wasn't what I was looking for, but I really liked it because I like Kicks and I like Hanoi Rocks and kind of like that. So apparently, originally the drummer Russ Hammock and the guitar player Bruce Batten, he passed away a few years ago. They were high school friends. They formed this band. Originally, it was called Dolores Telescope. I mean, originally our band was called Dolores Telescope. And then, to go to that, there was a band called Theater. They had a record deal, and that band broke. They were like a big band. They wanted to go. They'd open for like Ozzy and stuff. But they broke up, and I believe it was the guitar player and the drummer formed a band with this guy that used to be in Brat, the Dolores Telescope, and so they just took the name. So that was a totally separate band. But the one guy that's in it was in Brat. So that's where that came from. So originally, Brat was Dolores Telescope, but then they changed the name to Cinderella. And so when I joined the band, I was like the last guy, but we had a lead guitar player named James Cheshire, the first. And he was in the transition of moving to Ocala. So he joined the band before I did, but I was there before he was. Now, Cinderella, they were all glammy. And then, but when I first joined Brat, they weren't, after a while we got the studs and leather and stuff. But originally we just wore straight leg jeans and Capizio shoes and t-shirt, cut off t-shirts. And it's called a Cinderella. It just didn't seem to fit. So we kind of decided to change the name, and so I think one of the singer's girlfriend said, "Oh, you guys are a bunch of brats. You should call it Brats." We changed her name to Brat, and it's funny because first Cinderella, when we first heard their record coming out, they're not going to do anything. Of course, they became huge, and then when I was in Brat, with the Rat came out with their EP. Oh, Rat, that sounds like Brat. They're not going to do anything. Of course, they became huge.
Right. You
So
know
yeah,
who
that's
was
the evolution of the names.
Do you know who was responsible for stylizing the way the name appeared on the first release and so
Yeah.
on?
Okay. Our original drummer Russ Hammock, he lived in Clearwater, and he had a nice house with swimming pool and everything, and they had this big room, this a laundry room. It was big enough that we could set up a whole drum set and amps and everything. We rehearsed in his parents' house 5 nights a week and religiously. And so his father was pretty wealthy. There's a bank. I wish I could remember Fortune. I don't know. There's a bank in Clearwater that he was like the CEO of. He was voted Mr. Clearwater one year. So he would like, oh, I think you guys should get incorporated. I'll take care of it. So we had lawyers. We were band was incorporated, or had our name trademarked, all these things. So, but this bank he worked at, they had this one guy that was an artist, and as a favor, because he did commercial art for the bank, so they got this professional artist to do the logo.
Interesting. So you guys had a logo, you guys had this band now, Brat. Do you remember the first gig or two that you guys did?
There's a bar called Night Moves. It was kind of like a little bit divier of a club. But that band theater I previously mentioned that turned into the other Dolores Telescope, they had a record out and the band decided to break up. So they decided to play at this bar for like a couple of weeks just to get money before, because most of them lived in Chicago. They all split up. So they had us open there for there. So we played there a lot. But we would play at that Mr. T's, and so we played at most of the places around. And but the funny thing is, our lead guitar player from Ocala, James Cheshire, now he was kind of more old school. He was in like Thin Lizzy and Uriah Heep. So like originally the guitar playing sounded kind of like Ace Frehley, kind of old school guitar. But he was a half Native American, and he was crazy. He'd wrestle alligators. He'd jump on moving trains. He was just fearless guy. So, but he lived in Ocala, and he's always, should come up here and play this bar juniors. And so we went up there. It was like out of a movie, man. Some of these mountain men type people came out, and I was afraid to hit on any girls because I didn't know whose sister or ex-girlfriend he was and stuff. And I remember one night we were leaving, and these big mountain men, they were over there, guy goes, I'll match sticks with you. And they go, one guy grabs a baseball bat, another one grabs an axe handle, and they're having at it. Well, see you tomorrow, guys, So that was a good adventure there.
Sounds kind of crazy. So,
but we were with James. We were okay. They all knew James.
okay.
So we were okay.
At what point did you all think it was time to go into the studio and record some music?
Well, what happened was when I joined the band, they already had a demo made, and like I said, the songs were very good. I kind of mentioned like Hicks because the songs they weren't 3-chord songs. They're fast paced and they're kind of complicated. They had a lot of changes in them and stuff, but they're all about boys and girls. They had one song, they have like Hooked on You or You Can't Come Back or Steal Your Love Away. And, they're all that type of thing. But basically it's, our drummer, Russ Hammock, knew this guy named Dan Johnson, who him and his wife, Barb Johnson, had Power Records. That they're starting their own record label. And they later on got Savatage and Crimson Glory started. The problem was Brat was the first band that got signed, so we were the guinea pigs. He didn't know what to do with us. But yes, but the thing is, he was into European metal and stuff, and he signed us, but he said, "Okay, well, you guys need to get heavier." So that was the big transaction. We went from playing, the boppy type hard rock stuff to what's on the Brat album, and so yeah, that's basically we had to commit. We started dressing heavier and stuff. So it was a transaction that became him. Now I loved it. Me and the drummer Russ Hammock and the guitar player Bruce Band loved it. But the singer and the other guitar player Chris Ajar, the real singer's name Ray Rosario, they went along with it, but they wanted to be more commercial. So that was like part of the problem with the end of the band. But yeah, so that's how we got into recording.
You mentioned the first demo. What year did that come out?
Okay. Well, I joined in like late 81. So it came out probably around 81, I'm guessing.
Okay.
And
so
then
when you joined the band, was the first release you were on, was that the Steal Your Heart Away 7-inch?
Yeah, well, we actually did like a little 8-track demo, 4-track demo that came out before that kind of made its way, like that kind of got us known a little bit. It was just called the Brat demo because we since it was recorded in some guy's house. It was okay for what it was, but we didn't want people to think that, say, oh, this poor quote. We called it Brat demo, so people would say, okay, it's just a demo. So, but it's actually good. It had, I'm trying to think, it had Born Under the Northern Star, Black Widow, Throw the Key, and the song called The Night Stalker I wrote. And so that was the first one. But basically, Dan Johnson decided first to put out a single. And so he took us all the way up to the studio in Atlanta at a guy's house again. And we recorded about 7 or 8 songs, but the single was Steal Your Heart Away, which is again a commercial song. But the B-side is a song I wrote called Recurring Nightmare, which was heavier. And but the problem was the Dan Johnson guy, he went ahead and made 500 singles. And then when he listened to it, because he was the producer, he called himself the Kid, but he produced the record. He produced Savatage. Anytime you see the Kid, it's Dan Johnson. So he wasn't our playing, but the production wasn't so good. He was embarrassed by it. So he never released it. So again, here he got a single, and he went doing. I got this record store. What's sell? No, I even had a guy from the local rock station want to play it. He was, oh hell no! I almost got kicked out of the band. You got to tell your bass player, got to talk to me first and everything. So that didn't do anything. So then they signed Savatage. They were called Avatar at the time. And long story, they put out the Avatar record, which became big in Europe, and so we're waiting for our turn. Then they put out the Savatage Sirens album that went really big. We're waiting for our turn. Then they put out Dungeons of Calling. So the whole year, we were waiting to put out our record, and all they did was put out records and promote Savatage. So that's why really, when Spar Records didn't put out anything. Now, one thing I want to go back and say, I don't blame them for not doing that because it wasn't a real proper record company. It's some guy in his house and their 2.5 kids. So they put out a record Savatage, and they go, okay, they put all their eggs in one basket. It wasn't good for us. Because when we signed the contract, we had lawyers look at it and they would say, well, this will happen if a record comes out. This will happen if it never said that they would put out a record. We just assumed it, So, and then we again with Savatage, I'm mad at them. They had nothing to do with it. So that happened. But the record you're talking about, Sword and Stone, we went into Morrisound Studios and we recorded that ourselves. And it wasn't released until after the band broke up.
Was that the first time the band and yourself had stepped foot into Morrisound?
Morrisound, yeah.
I believe they opened the doors in 81, if I'm not mistaken.
It could be. Like I said, that's the thing is that, like I talked about Brat being the guinea pigs, that I don't know why we went all the way up to Atlanta, Georgia, and recorded this guy's house. But after that, Dan Johnson took Savatage into the old Morrisound Studios. They moved. And so after that, we would always go to Morrisound. And that's where bands like, Death and Obituary and all those bands around Tampa all recorded Morrisound. It was kind of known as being a metal or recording studio.
Definitely. And thinking back in that early beginnings when you were first stepping foot into Morrisound, what was that experience like for you? Because I imagine at that time it wasn't the Morrisound it would become. It was still fairly new at that time. Is that right?
Yeah, it was still a good studio. It's in a kind of rough neighborhood. But because like I said, the first time, really, the only time I ever recorded was at this guy's studio. Now, him, I remember, a guy named Mike Normandow. And he had a studio in his house. And he was really good for, the equipment he had. But it's my first time in the studio. And we had recorded a whole album's worth of material. And, but what, we didn't do anything. We actually went there one time and did a demo for Power Records, but they never did anything with it. So yeah, nothing ever got released through there. But our first album, the problem with the first album is that we were paying for it ourselves. So I had a job pushing a lawnmower doing lawn maintenance. And I was making $4.25 an hour, but the studio costs $100 an hour, And so it was just a lot of pressure not to screw up because it costs money. So, but we got through it. And that first album, I'm still proud of it. I think all these years later, I think it holds up, for the money we put into it. I'm still proud of it.
Yeah. And thinking about some of those songs that are some of your personal favorites? I know you mentioned some of the ones that you had written personally. Are there any others that stand out to you that you think very fondly back on?
Yeah. So basically, the first guitar player mentioned, James Cheshire, he didn't stay in the band very long because he was in Ocala and he kind of thought things would go faster than they did because with Brat it was a long process. We didn't play out much. We rehearsed 5 nights a week. So he didn't last very long. And but he didn't write anything. At the time, Bruce Batten wrote most of the songs. Like I said, me and the singer wrote all the lyrics about 50-50. I was writing the heavier stuff, and he kind of started writing more heavy like I did. But and I wrote a few songs, but I wrote my songs on bass, like Born Under the Northern Star. If you're familiar with that, it's all found the bass line. And I think that was some of the complaints of people, it sounds like Iron Maiden. I'm like, yeah, so what's wrong with that? But anyway, but the second guitar player we had was named Mike Sacco. And he was a cool looking guy, had long hair and leather and everything, played the Gibson Explorer. And he wrote great songs. And so he wrote the music to Throw Away the Key, which I think is our best song. I wrote the lyrics. And that song was based on the legend of the Man in the Iron Mask. And but it had the power chords and everything, and the plotting bass line and all that. And but also he wrote that Black Widow song we talked about. Our singer Ray wrote the lyrics for that one. But those are two of our stronger songs, I think. And then there's a song called Road Warrior that Bruce Batten wrote, but I wrote the lyrics for that one as well. Those, I think, all three of those were on our first demo. And again, I don't think Road Warrior made the first album. But but those are the songs that pop out the most.
Yeah. There's another song I really like too called Night Stalker. You remember what that one was about?
Yeah, that was on our first demo, and that was kind of one of our heavier songs. It was bordering on death metal. And Night Stalker is just some sort of demonic monster type thing. He's a thrasher, he's a slasher to tear your soul apart. They call him the Night Stalker.
It definitely not only the music was heavier, but the lyrics were a bit darker, I felt like, than some of the other songs.
Yeah, like I said, I was into horror movies and stuff. So that was definitely about some sort of demonic monster that tear your soul apart, kind of type of thing, that kill you and drag you to hell with them type of thing. So I like that one. But that one really, I don't know why it ended up on the EP. I liked it, but we didn't really play it live a lot, and it didn't make the first album. But I'm happy you brought it up because that was one of the ones I liked.
Yeah, it's a great tune. What were the crowds like back then? How would you describe the audience that was coming to some of these shows?
Okay. Well, that was the beauty of the 80s, because when I moved down here, it was, just towards the end of 81. And the drinking age was 19. And you figure that's a beautiful age because these kids are right out of high school. Most of them still living at home. They got BS jobs. They don't, and they'll just go out to the bar and they would have they'd have quarter beer night or dime shot night or no, well drink, 10-cent well drink night. You can get drunk on $3 back then. So they had all these young people there, and they had beautiful girls. I mean, the girls were gorgeous, had the big hair and all the metalheads and stuff. So yeah, it was like, you figure that probably the average age was like 19 to like 24. It had all these young, good-looking kids out there, very enthusiastic, drinking like crazy. It was a great time.
How would you describe your look back then?
Okay, well, I thought I was a good-looking kid. I had the big hair. I tried to look like Rudy Sarzo. That's what I tried. But yeah, I was really big about having my hair all spiked because I had really full hair. I'm 62. I still got it for the most part. But
you do have a full head of hair, John. So that's fantastic.
Well, I shouldn't say this, but in my family, my dad, my two older brothers are all bald. So I skipped that bullet somehow. I don't know how.
You did. Good for you.
And the funny thing is, up until recently, I had really long hair. I just cut it off.
Wow. How long ago was that?
It was about 6 months ago.
What made you decide to cut it?
Well, it was just kind of getting in the way. I see. I don't think the whole Bigfoot thing. I try to look like a mountain man for my image, because my pen name is Famous John Urban, and I got this hat I wear and stuff. So I try to look kind of mountain man for that reason. But even though I don't really go in the woods, I want to look like I do. But yeah, I had my hair textured and had bangs and stuff. And but then once we started getting heavier, uh, that was like the thing with the image is a little bit off because me and Bruce Batten, the guitar player, and Russ Hammock, the drummer, we would go and buy leather. There used to be this, ever hear of Tandy Leather that would sell stuff?
I don't think so.
Okay, there's a store called Tandy Leather you could buy, but they would sell, like how they used to have the pyramid studs and everything. We'd go like the thrift stores and place and buy old leather and we'd rip them up and make our own clothes. We put in the stud earrings, our stud diamonds and all that stuff. And I'd get armbands with crosses and studs and we just try to make it look like we were Vikings or something and purposely make them look, because we weren't really trying to be the pretty glam thing. We were trying more like Wasp, basically. So we're all into that. The singer guitar player were quite as much into it. They wore leather pants and ripped up shirts, maybe one armband, that's it. So, but yeah, I just love dressing up because really I was so into like a Kiss and Alice Cooper. So I wanted to be theatrical. I just wanted
Sure.
to just,
I mean, you mentioned Gene Simmons, so right there,
Yeah.
I mean, Kiss.
Yeah, the hero.
How do you get more theatrical than that? So,
Well, it's funny because, like for the last 15, 18 years of Kiss, where that Tommy Thayer guy was filling in for East Straley. And Tommy Thayer once said that, because Gene Simmons, is a pretty good bass player. And Tommy Thayer had an interview and he said, one time, because Tom Thayer is more, technically a good guitar player. He said, I went to Gene and said, Gene, if you would practice, you'd actually be a pretty good musician. And rather than get offended, Gene goes, I'm not a musician, I'm a rock star. And that's kind of like with me, I always want to be a good bass player. I try to play in the pocket and I'm my best. Sometimes people compare me to Steve Harris and stuff. But I was really into the show, the theatrics of being a performer. It was all together, So I had the image, moving on stage, all that stuff. And that's one thing about Brad. That's why I thought we had a chance to make it if we actually had a record out on a real label, because we were good musicians. We're kind of like Def Leppard. You don't really hear about people saying the guitar player, drummer, or well, I shouldn't say the drummer, got one of them. Anyway, the bass player being their favorite musician. But you put them in, and Joe Elliott's not the greatest singer in the world, but you put them together on stage, they're just a great live band. That's how I thought Brat was. I thought together we were a great live band. So we would have been a great opening act.
were you guys aware of people from labels scouting bands locally at that time? And did you guys get any rubs from any labels that you can remember?
Not scouting, because we're all the way down in Florida. I mean, it could have happened, but I wasn't aware of it. So what happened was, okay, so like I said, we started out with Power. They didn't do anything with us, and then they went on with Savatage and Crimson Glory, both bands that became huge around the world, and both bands ended up on Atlantic. So I always kind of thought if we were like the third band signed to Power Records instead of the first one, we could have benefited from that. We were the guinea pigs. But basically what happened was we recorded our album and we were talking to Metal Blade Records, Brian Slagle, and he liked us. And then we were talking to Ron Keel, that used to be in that band Steeler that Yngwie Malmsteen started out in. And then Ron Keel had his own band Keel. And we tracked him down. Okay. Well, our Brat was really into Steeler. But I think they're on the verge of getting signed to major when they lost Yngwie Malmsteen. He went and joined Alcatraz. But anyway, on Steeler's back album, they said Ron Keel gets his hair cut at this certain salon. So I'm there hanging out one day with the drummer, and we say, hey, let's call up the salon. They call him up and say, hey, we're in a band called Brat in Florida. We're trying to get in touch with Ron Keel. He goes, oh, okay, I'll give you his phone number. And we're like, okay. So we get his number. So we call up Ron Keel. He's like, hello? And the drummer's talking, hey, this is Russell, I'm sorry, this is Russ Hammock from Brat. We're a band in Florida, and we think really great and everything, and blah, blah. He's like, who are you? Oh, I'm Russ Hammock from Brat. And we're a big fan and everything. And he goes, how did you get my number? And he goes, oh, well, you're on the back of your album, you put down what salon you called. We went down there and talked to this one guy, and he gave me a number. He goes, well, I have to have a talk with him. He goes, yeah, well, we just thought you were great and everything. He goes, maybe the guy's got a big set of balls, He goes, I like that. He goes, I'll tell you what, here's my address, just send me your demo. And it worked, so we sent the demo and he listened to it and he liked, I was happy. He liked the bass playing, he liked the songs. He just thought the background vocals needed some work. He goes, hey, I'm trying to get into production. And he was interested in producing us. He even invited us to come to LA and open for his band Keel. I think it's called Perkins Palace. So that's one thing. So we almost did that, except we were supposed to save up $500 and most of us didn't. So it never happened, but that was one opportunity.
Wow. Did you guys ever do any touring, whether it be within Florida or outside of the state?
Unfortunately not. I mean, except for the 2 weekends we went to that Ocala place, it was scary. We just kind of, the funny thing about Tampa Bay is Tampa's a small town, Clearwater's a small town, and St. Pete's a small town. So they kind of incorporated together Tampa Bay to make it, more so. So we kind of stuck around, that area for the most part playing. We didn't really tour.
Who was promoting some of these shows? I know you mentioned you had done some, but was there anyone else promoting you guys in the area, trying to get you more shows and that sort of thing?
Not really that I could think of. I mean, I would think that in the early 90s, we booked our own shows headlining wise. So I think we were one of the grounding bands and the grounding metal bands in Tampa. But there's Savatage, of course. But then Nasty Savage was another big band. And I was friends with those guys. And I remember, Nasty Ronnie, he was like the Muhammad Ali of metal. He was just a promoter and showman and everything else. And so he would just send out these demos to all these like publications, metal fanzines and stuff. So one time I went over to his house and he gave me a list of some, okay, we'll write these guys, blah, blah, blah. So I started doing that. And there's a magazine called Metal Forces, and they gave us a good demo review, I should say. Really not too many people helped us promote shows. We pretty much did self-promotion ourselves. But I was just kind of going to kind of that. We still talk to Brian Slegel of Metal Blade Records, and we when the contract with Power Records ended, we didn't see a reason to re-sign with them. So we recorded our own album at Morrisound Studios. And so, we paid for it, but Metal Blade Records was going to release it. And so they sent us a contract in the mail. But we're all going to meet at the drummer's house. We had the contract in my hands. I was all eager to sign. I thought Metal Blade Records was the biggest label at the time. And independently, let me say it, Metal Blade Records is the biggest independent label. And all of a sudden the singer shows up. He goes, oh, that Metal Forces review did us good. We had this A&R guy from Atlantic Records named Nick Loft. And he read the interview and contacted the singer. And he goes, okay, let's forget about Metal Blade. We got Atlantic. I'm like, well, we got a contract with Metal Blade. We got some guy. Our demo's on top of the packs. Top of the stack. So basically, we ended up not signing with Metal Blade. I think I was the only guy who wanted to go to Metal Blade. And we ended up going to Atlantic, and sadly that never happened. But then we started toning down our image. We started toning down our trying to write more commercial songs, and we kind of, we pretty much stopped playing all the old stuff. We just started writing new songs. And me and the drummer, Rose Hammock, and the guitar player, Bruce Batten, weren't happy that direction. And we had a manager who's kind of promoting us. Well, Warren Wyatt, that's the other thing. We did have a manager, Warren Wyatt. And he went on to promote or produce or manage, I should say, Crimson Glory and Saigon Kick. But again, we were his guinea pigs. So we went from being compared to Maiden and Old Priest to re-recording a cover of the Archie Sugar Sugar. Do you ever hear the song?
Of course. Sugar, that's quite the contrast there.
Yeah. Well, what it was is Twisted Sister had just put out "We're Not Going to Take It" stuff. So what we did, okay, we'll take that song. We had the cover, you could gun 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 gun, honey, dun 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 gun gun. We had but still, I'd be showing at a gig and all the metal people show up. We're playing that. Now the girls loved it. They'd be bringing shots on stage. The girls loved it. The guys hated it. But that was the transition of us selling out and getting more commercial. And I was totally against it. I was the only person. My thought is that all these labels like Atlantic, they sign a bunch of bands and they throw them against the wall to see which one will stick. They don't really care. And if you don't sell records, you're gone. They don't care. All they care is about, they're basically financial backers. And that's like a lot of bands go bankrupt because basically they put this money into it, and that money's got to be paid back by record sales. If it doesn't happen, you're financially, liable for it. That's why I'm trying to think off the top of my head. Tom Petty went bankrupt. Twisted Sister went bankrupt. Mick Fleetwood went bankrupt. Ted Nugent went bankrupt. All these people went bankrupt, and they managed to come back and find another label and come back, but a lot of people don't. So I wasn't really that excited. The best way to get signed to major is if you get on an independent label, because a lot of the bands like Motley Crue and Rats and even Metallica, they got an independent label and they sell a bunch of records. Then you can go to major. Hey, okay, we sold 50,000 units, blah, blah, blah. You have more bargaining power. So, and I really want to go with Metal Blade. And particularly, I remember after I quit the band, I had a friend of mine who's kind of in the record industry, and he would get free concert tickets. Every now and then he'd take me to concert for free. Named Fred McHenry, I forget what label he worked with. But we went to see Metallica's Black Tour. And we're walking around there, and we had talked to Brian Slagle that owns Metal Blade Records, but I'd never seen him. And we see this guy, with a beard, wearing hockey clothes and stuff. And my friend goes, "Hey, that's Brian Slagle." We're just walking around, during intermission of the show. I'm like, "What? That's Brian Slagle? Are you sure?" "Oh, yeah, that's him." So I'm like, "Oh, what the heck?" I went up to him and started talking to him, and he remembered me, remembered Brat, and he remembered that song, "Throw Away the Key." And he goes, "Yeah, what happened to you guys?" So I said, "Well, we had Atlantic Records interested, and so we kind of, went that direction, didn't work out for us. I wanted to go with you, blah, blah, blah." And he told me, because I guess once or twice a year, Metal Blade would put out these compilation albums. I think they called Metal Massacre or something like that.
Right.
And he had planned, because he's going to put out our album, but he's also going to take that Throw Away the Key song and put on the Metal Massacre album, and that would go all over America and Europe. And that would have given us huge exposure. So I just kind of think that we would have had a chance if we'd gone on Metal Blade. So but we'll never know. But
sure. Do you think also because that era there was a lot of tape trading too? Did you feel like you guys got more known at all through other circles and other scenes that may not have been in Florida necessarily? But did you feel like people were learning about Brat in any way?
definitely that first demo we put out, the 4 songs, that apparently was really big on being traded. And it's funny that that when we put out our first single, and in fact, I got it here. We can see it. This with the logo we talked about. Our first single, we all got a few copies and everything. Somehow it leaked out. By that, Dan Johnson got probably that single was going for like hundreds of dollars because it was so limited. I never got any of that money. But
you have yours in a frame though, so that's
I got it in a frame. It's on the wall. I just took it off so I can show it.
Yeah.
And then the same thing. Now, this album we had, it's called Sword and Stone. It's one of the songs. A lot of the songs in our first album had a medieval theme. We'll Throw Away the Key and Sword and Stone and stuff. As a matter of fact, remember that band Armored Saint?
Yes.
Yeah, they had a lot of medieval stuff, that sort of thing. So we had a lot of medieval stuff because that's what I was into. I wrote a lot of lyrics. So some people were kind of jokingly calling us Armored Brat. So we were compared to them a lot. But this there's a label called I got almost smelled like or Hades Paradise. That's what Hades Paradise. And this was supposedly a 500 limited edition vinyl. And I think I got one check for $60, and that was it. And I see this on eBay and stuff going for all this money, and I ain't getting all that money. So basically that was our one-shot deal with that. But then after the band broke up, and let's see here, I got this one. So then, Ray and our drummer Russ Hammock and Bruce Batten, they left the band, left Brat. And they eventually formed their own band, the Atomic Cocktail. Now, initially they were called Thunder, but of course there's 100 bands already called Thunder, So they eventually became Atomic Cocktail. So there was a label based in Las Vegas and called Retrospect Records. And they would just take, bands that, that have never made it and re-release them, like that band Stranger we were talking about before. They were on there and everything. And so we had our record re-released on CD, We had our famous picture there and the logo, and we did pretty well on there for a while. And they would pay us better than the first label did. But I'm understanding that this was doing pretty well in Europe, particularly Germany and Holland. Like everyone talks about being big in Japan, we were big in Holland for some reason. Because after I quit Brat, me and Bruce Batten, I recorded this Urban Vault we were kind of talking about. Now that's where I took 4 of the songs that I wrote the lyrics for Brat. Well, actually, one Black Widow, I renamed it Criminal Mind, and Throw Away the Key, Born Under the Northern Star, and Road Warrior. And so, but anyway, Atomic Cocktail, they had 2 different singers. One was Todd Plant. Is a pretty known singer. And but anyway, they did pretty well. And so then they said, hey, why don't we put out the Brat record? And it's so funny that Bruce Batten called me. He wanted me to get involved with it because they wanted to put out all the lyrics, and Bruce didn't know the lyrics, so he had to get me to get the lyrics for him. So we put that out, and but so that kind of gave some new life to us and everything.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, I don't think Retrospect's around anymore.
There were a lot of songs, though, that were on that CD compilation that were not on some of the other Brat recordings. I know Hall of the Mountain King was one of them. Was that released previously, or was that first time was on that compilation?
I thought it was on the first album. Because basically, the main songs, we had the first single that they were embarrassed by, that Celia Hardaway and Recurrent Nightmare, they were put on that one. But In the Hall of Mountain King was on the first album.
And that title in particular, that song, you remember what year that was recorded?
Yeah, let's see here. Put some notes. That was 19. Hold on a second. We did it in 1984. And I know that because we were talking off camera before about that with the Savatage thing.
And I was wondering, because the Savatage release was in 87, if I'm not mistaken, with that album and that song.
No, okay. I got to be careful about this, because I had some issues with Savatage, because basically before Brat, I had a 2-day audition for Savatage. They were called Avatar back then. And I went and auditioned, and they were, I can even remember the songs we played. I auditioned, I did Green Mile Alicia by Judas Priest, Crazy Train by Ozzy, Wasted by Def Leppard, He's a Whore by Cheap Trick, and Atomic Punk by Van Halen. But then there's also Earth Mother by Samson. That was Bruce Dickinson's old band. They're impressed that I knew that song. I didn't tell them, but I just had some compilation metal. I just happened to have it. But there's a song to play. Oh, no. And this is before you could just download songs on the internet, But I went there and played those songs and stuff. And like I said, I had $1,000 bass, I had the hair and everything. And I think one of the problems I might have made was I was telling, oh, I'm a songwriter and I'm an artist. I can do the studio and I can do this and I can do that. And basically Savatage was all about the Oliva brothers, the singer John Oliva and Chris Oliva. It was their band. So I think they wanted a bass player to be a hired gun to shut up, play bass. So I might have pushed it too much. I don't know. But John Oliva was saying, okay, you did great. We got a couple other bass players we want to look at, but we'd like you to come back tomorrow. So I came back a second day. And then the second day, John Oliva goes, okay, well, we got a couple guys we promised to look at, but unless we find a geezer butler, you got the job. And I never heard from him. And then 2 weeks later, I finally called. They had this guy named Scott that was acting as a manager, some kid. I called Scott, and he goes, oh, we got a bass player. Sorry. I'm like, all right. But what happened was when I went down there, they had this older guy, kind of like a biker-looking guy. So he was in his 40s. And he named Keith Collins. And he was kind of acting as their manager. He's also their sound man and manager, and he owned the PA and all that stuff. And he was giving me the dirty look the whole time, made me uncomfortable. And well, long story short, he talked his way into the band. He wasn't even a bass player, he was a guitar player. He goes, look, I'll join the band and I'll help do the business and stuff. And then once you guys get signed to major, I'll step down and be the road manager. So they got him in the band instead of me, even though he wasn't even a bass player. I think I was more qualified for the band. But what happened, once he joined Savatage, he didn't want to quit. So he made it up to, I think, the first album. They finally dumped him. They got Johnny Middleton. And you were talking about that band Lefty. Johnny Middleton was in this band Lefty. And talk about hair bands. That band was all the girls' most favorite band. All had good-looking guys, all dyed their hair blonde. And that's where he came from. That's why locally there's some resentment. Oh, you got this poser in the band. But he's a good bass player, you know. But anyway, so that's what happened in Savatage. So I had a 2-day audition. I didn't make the band. But then also later on, there's a band that practices at the same rehearsal studio. And they talked to Chris Oliva. I don't like to talk about the dead, but they said, oh, yeah, we're going to audition John Urban. He goes, oh, yeah, he auditioned for us. He didn't cut the mustard. And they didn't want to audition me. I'm like, oh, man, what's up with that? You know, I'd learned the songs. And so I don't know what his deal was. So I wasn't happy with him for a while, but I kind of got over it. And as a matter of fact, once I became a journalism, I wrote a lot about him, you know, from different newspapers and things like that.
I was wondering, did you still go out and see them play?
Yeah. And but they were a better band. I mean, you know, John Oliva, I think, was a genius. He could sing, play guitar, play bass, play drums, do it all. And he just had this amazing voice. And as heavy as his voice was, he had a beautifully melodic voice. If you listen to some songs like Red Wings or something, guy's great voice. And Chris Oliva, of course, is an amazing guitar player. So they were a good band and stuff. But I remember when they put out the last album with Chris Oliva, that Edge of Thorns, they did that at Tampa. I was writing for the Tampa Tribune. I wrote record reviews, and they didn't want to record, or the newspaper didn't want to cover them, because they're a metal band. I talked them into it. And so, I interviewed Chris Oliva and it was in the newspaper, and I gave him like a 9 or 10 star review. So I wasn't, vengeful or anything. It just, but the thing is that when I was in Brat, we came up with this In the Hall of Mountain King song, and I wrote the lyrics. And if you listen to the two songs side by side, they're kind of slow plodding songs, similar. And then the other thing, see, I'm not saying they ripped it off or anything, but like our song said like, they rule the night in the Hall of the Mountain King, but they rule the night. And there goes, madness reigns in the Hall of the Mountain King. So I got, they rule, and they say madness reigns, rule reigns, same thing. So I don't know, kind of similar. But what happened was when I quit Brat and everything, when me and Bruce, we did. Oh yeah, I like props. Well, me and Bruce recorded this Urban Vault thing. I wanted John Oliva to produce it, only to use his name. I thought, hey, produced by John Oliva Savatage, So they were in the studio recording demos for their second album. And I went there one night, they invited me over there, and I gave them and I saw John Oliva was playing bass because they hadn't hired a bass player yet. And they had this one guy there who was saying, hey man, well, why don't you audition and stuff? So the next day I brought a demo tape, and I put 4 songs in there, and I know I put in the Hall of Mountain King because I thought that sounded the most like Savatage. And so I gave it to them and stuff, and so I was there for 2 nights and everything. And about a week or so later, John Oliva said, well, I listened to your tape. No, I also gave him the tape of the demo that I was working on. He goes, yeah, it sounds pretty good. I don't really think I do much different, so he didn't seem like he wanted to do it. But he had the tape. And the next album, In the Hall of Mountain King, was their big song. So I'm not saying they ripped me off or anything. I just think they got the idea from me. Because the thing is, like Iron Maiden on their, that Fly to Victory song is all about that mythological song. Are you familiar with the story? About the man and his son.
Yeah.
Okay. In mythology, this man and his son are in a prison. And the father was a great inventor. So he went around collecting all these bird feathers. And so he made 2 sets of wings using wax that he attached these bird figures on with the wax. So him and his son were going to fly away, but he warned his son, don't fly too high to the sun because the sun will melt the wax. But of course, the kid's excited about flying. And basically the wax melts the feathers and the kid plunges to his death. So that's what Flight of Icarus is all about. But then Kansas, years later, wrote a song called Born on Wings of Steel that's all about the same thing. So, same idea. So that's why I'm saying Savatage, they just took an idea. You can't sue over that. But, I like to think of Savatage, I think John Lee was like a borderline genius. So the big song that made them big, he got the idea for me. So it kind of makes me feel a little better. But
With what you had mentioned, John, regarding some of the challenges with some of the direction of the sound for Brat, did you all ever get the opportunity to play a final show before the band did break up?
Um, I think the breakup went pretty quick because we didn't really play a lot of shows. And basically, Bruce Batten and Russ Hammock left. They ended up putting their own band together. And a funny thing, if you look at Atomic Cocktail, I used to call it Brat Light because they still wore the same type of outfits that we wore. And they took a lot of the songs, like two of the songs I wrote the lyrics for, Throw the Key and Road Warrior, they redid. And then some of the songs, like we had that song Bad Blood, Bruce wrote that and he changed the lyrics to Cutthroat. So they kind of redid majority of their stuff for songs they already wrote in Brat, they just revised it. So, but they already left, and we got another drummer, David Smith, who's an amazing drummer. But it just, the thing is that Ray and Chris took over the band because, once Russ and Bruce left, who were kind of aligned with what I wanted to do, then it was just me against the two other guys. And then the drummer joined, and he was in a metal band before, and he thought, I want to go get a record deal, I'll do whatever they say. So it became the Chris and Ray band. And so I stuck it out for as long as I could stand it, but I finally quit. So I don't really remember about Aware being the last show.
Yeah, that's understandable. I know you all did a Metal Fest type show
Oh, yeah.
at the Coachman
Coachman
Park
Park.
where it was you guys, Brat, and Visigoth. What do you remember of that show?
Well, that was like the best and worst night of my life. Basically, well, again, with Russ's father, that was, CEO of this bank, he had a lot of influence. So somehow he got us that gig. I don't know the details of it, but the drummer's father used his contacts to get it. So Coachman Park is a pretty large park, and they had like one of those band shell type stages, but it's huge. And we were friends with these guys, this band Visigoth. And we shouldn't have called it a metal fest because they're just two bands, But we go there, and it was a summer night and everything. We knew it was kind of rainy, as Florida is, and but we hoped to do it anyway. And I remember Visigoth, they were only supposed to play for like a half hour, 45 minutes. Well, they kept playing, and we didn't want to stop them. We just let them play. So by the time we went on there, we had it made the newspaper, and there's an estimated like 2,000 kids there. That was like our biggest show of our career. And after like 4 or 5 songs, got rained out. So it was an incredible show
Yeah.
for 4 or 5 songs, and then it got rained out.
Did you guys ever have merch at that time, like T-shirts or anything like that?
Not really, because the thing about, well, okay, I got one right here. Well, the thing about T-shirts, the problem is that everyone wants T-shirts but don't want to pay for them. Any band I was at, anytime you got T-shirts, people, don't want to pay for them. But the main thing is with T-shirts, you got to have small, medium, large, extra large, 2X, 4X, and the girls want, their little French cut shirts, and the guys want tank tops, and it just, never make any money at it. But when we, see if you can see that, basically, that one manager we had, Warren Wyatt, he was going to try to get us on the road touring as an original band. And so he was saying, I want you guys to get a promo picture, and I want you guys to dress as wild as possible. So you see, this is me there. I don't know if you can see, but I got all my studs and leather, big hair. Now, Chris, we talked him into wearing that. I don't know if you can see, if there's all these studs. Of course, he never wore the slide. He would go to, what was that place? That's it, merry-go-round there's some store in the mall. Yeah, he would go there and get his.
Yeah, it was likely merry-go-round.
Yeah. Well, he would get like the pretty vest. Because like I said, I completely ripped this up and remade it myself. It had all the leather. And like I said, Ray, he wore the leather pants. We just wore like a tattered shirt. And then Russ this is Russ here and Bruce, they dressed more like I did. But we had these, and well, basically it was the same time period when Ron Keel wanted us to come to LA and play with them, and we were going to meet with Metal Blade. So we all decided to save about $500. We were going to rent a van and go out there and do it. Well, guess who's the only guy that saved about $500? I was pushing a lawnmower for $425. I saved up $500. Nobody else did.
Yeah.
So I took my $500 and we got a professional photographer, and we even had a hairstylist do our hair.
Wow.
And we did a big photo session. We got this picture. This is, when it ended up on our CD. And I print up all these posters. And so we tried to sell them and everything.
I saw that picture too on a flyer that you all played a show at the Astro Skate Center in Tarpon Springs with another band called Juvenile.
Juvenile, yeah, that's another band we were friends with. I didn't feel too bad about playing Astro Skate because after Joe Perry quit Aerosmith and he kind of rock bottom out, Joe Perry played Astro Skate. It was a skating rink.
I was wondering, did they have a lot of shows there?
Yeah, they did. So after Joe Perry played, I can play. We had a lot of kids show. It was a fun show. But we haven't really gotten around to talk about some other bands. But one other band I was almost in was called Power Surge. They were on Roadrunner Records. And they had a singer named James Mara, who was a good friend of mine. We were drinking buddies. Amazing voice. And so we almost, because he was in a band called Ansible. And that band, broke up after I quit Brat. And so he was like, hey, John, we're friends. I sing, you play bass, let's put a band together. So we started putting a band together with one of the guitar players, Todd Bosey, that played in this band Ansville. But it was slow moving. It didn't have a drummer, nothing was going on. And I ended up going to Cleveland, Ohio to visit some friends of mine. There's a band up there called Breaker. That was a big band that sounded like Accept, a great band. And the singer, that same bar band I talked about before, the guy who played guitar was the singer of Breaker, but he quit. But I decided to join Breaker instead of that band. Then I moved up to Cleveland, and I just didn't get along with the guys after a few months. It didn't work out. And,
how long were you there before you moved back to Florida?
About 3 months.
That's pretty fast.
Well, winter was approaching, and I was working lawn maintenance and stuff, and it's just I really didn't get along with the guys at all. And but anyway, but when I came back, this band, we were called Record at the time, and then they kind of reunited most of the guys in the old band. They renamed itself Power Surge. So I think they only put out one album, maybe two. They didn't really go over real big, but
yeah.
But anyway, with this urban vault thing, I wanted Jimbo was going to sing, but for some reason, his band, he was in a band that was touring like a cover band or something. He couldn't make it, so my friend Bruce said, "Okay, let's get this John guy to sing in there." So I got him on there, and John, the singer, his brother was a bass player, and so John wanted to form a band with a bass player. So, but he just did the project, the recording studio thing. And, I paid him a certain amount of money, and I took him out to dinner and bought him some, Beck's beer and all that type of stuff. And, but he wanted to get in a more commercial band. And I guess after the record came out, he came up to me and he said something like, "Oh, I'm friends with the guys in Savatage," and then Savatage gets in the story again. And Savatage told me that I can't stop you from putting out the record because I'm afraid you put this record out, it's going to hurt me getting into a commercial band. So Savatage says, "I can't stop you from putting the record out, but if you put my name or picture on that release, your lawyers will be talking to my lawyers." And here, I got this record, it's done. He agreed to do it. Now he's telling me, now he's threatening to sue me. So I didn't put a picture on there, and I came up with a name, Deceased, Ceist. But when you say it together, it's Deceased. I thought it was cool. So, and I kind of said, yeah, this is probably the only record you're ever going to be on. That's who sang on that record.
Wow. Did you guys record that anywhere that was new to you, or was it somewhere that you had recorded at before?
Yeah, we went to Morrisound again.
Okay. Was it any different that time around than when you were there with Brat?
Yeah, because I had because Morrisound Studios, they call it Morrisound because it was owned by Tom Morris, who also was a producer, but then his brother Jim Morris did a lot of production. And I found out that they were trying to get certain bands signed to major labels. And they were doing what they called demo deals. And if they liked the band, they would take them in the studio and record them for free. And that way, if they got signed, then they would get like a percentage, like a finder's fee. And if not, then the band got a free record. And that's what happened with this band, Power Search. They had that. And so I found out, I think, honestly, because we're arguing so much, if I hadn't quit Brat, they probably would kick me out. And I had heard through the grapevine that Morrisound was going to offer my band Brat one of these demo deals, which they did. But I called I called this guy, Jim Morris, and I asked him flat out, "Oh, no, that's crazy. We wouldn't do that." So he lied to me. As I quit the band, I found out they did. So I was kind of not happy with him. So when I went into Morrisound, there's another guy named Rick Miller. So I got him to produce the record, not him, because he lied to me, basically. But anyway, so that happened there.
Wow. So did you wind up doing anything later on, or what were you doing music-wise at that point after all this had happened?
Well, okay, so basically, when I was in Cleveland with that breaker band, I got to know there's this guy that lived in Chicago that had a record label called King Classic Records. And he wrote for this magazine, Art Shock America. There's a big, huge magazine in Europe called Art Shock that covered metal. And this one wife and daughter team in America bought the rights to the name of Art Shock. They called it Art Shock America. And it was distributed around America and in Japan. So they had a section in the middle that just covered local bands. They had different cities, like there was like a page or two about New York or LA or different cities. And they didn't have anyone covering Tampa. And so I was like, hey, I know all these guys. I can write. So through this guy in King Classic Records, I got, I started to cover the local Tampa bands and everything. And so that's pretty cool for a while. And I got to promote a lot of bands, and all that.
Who are some of your favorites that you have had the chance to cover?
Okay. Well, that band Rocks Gang I was almost in. Now they're kind of more glam and everything. But it's just, they were on Virgin Records. I personally think on their album, the 2 songs they released on MTV were just not their best songs. They had some, I thought they were really good. And I'm just trying to think. I remember Agent Steel. You ever hear of them?
I don't think so.
Okay. Well, Agent Steel was kind of a up-and-coming band, but they weren't from Tampa, but they recorded in Tampa. So I kind of hung out with those guys. But some of the guys that lived in Tampa, while they were down here, there's a guy named Richard Bateman that used to play for Nasty Savage and a few bands. He ended up passing away a few years ago as well. He played in Iced Earth. Yeah, that's the thing about it. Because basically, like with Tampa, you had your Savatage and Nasty Savage, but Iced Earth, John Schaefer was the guitar player. He wrote all the songs, and really, it was kind of a revolving project. He'd have different singers, different guitar players, and stuff. So, because I remember what happened was my first writing thing. I wrote for Art Shock America, and after, it was pretty good. They paid me $150 a month and everything, all these things. But after a few months, the magazine went out of business. It was a bummer. I'd go into grocery stores and see the magazine. It was great. So I was really bummed about that. So somebody encouraged me to put out my own magazine, a local magazine, and that focused on local bands. I called it The Last Word. I did that for a few months. And but I remember I was trying to promote the local scene, and I had a little falling out with John Schaefer because he calls me up because I put an ad in like a guitar store and say, hey, if you're a local band, you got a demo, let me know. And so he calls me, oh, we're going to be the next big thing, and all this stuff. And I'm like, okay, well, let me know when you're playing out. I'll come see you. Oh, we're too good to play out in Tampa. Tampa's beneath us. We just record, and they say don't play out. Oh no, not yet, not till we go on tour. And we're going to do this, or And I pretty much said, okay, well, let me know when you're touring. He goes, well, you're not going to write about us? And well, not till you're playing out. I'm covering the scene. You're not part of the scene. And then he kept pushing me. I kind of said the wrong thing. I said something like, well, if you're not playing out, you're just a bunch of guys jamming in a warehouse. So So, but then by the time I had Art Chuck America, they kind of started getting bigger. So I did write about them then.
Yeah. There was a story that I don't think has come up yet where Brat was potentially going to play a show opening up for Carmine Apiece. And
Oh,
does that ring any bells?
okay. That bar we're talking about, Mark Twain's, that became the power
Mark
company.
Twain's. Yeah, right.
Well, it's called the power company. Oh my gosh. Okay, you open up a story now.
Okay.
Oh my goodness. It's okay. So basically, Brat never got to open up for National Band, and so all of a sudden, King Cobra, because Carmine Apiece formed that band, King Cobra, and it's kind of funny that here's this older guy with a mustache, and all the guys were these young guys with the white hair and pretty boys, and so they had the old guy in the back behind the drums. But he is legendary. He's with Rod Stewart and all these people. He's Rock Hall
Played with Vanilla Fudge too, I want to say as well.
Yeah, Vanilla Fudge. Great drummer. But anyway, so somehow now I can't remember how it happened, but we got the chance to open for that gig. And that was one of the few times that the radio, because we had a following at that time. And at that time, most people, they had videos on MTV. Most people didn't know about King Cobra. I couldn't name you one King Cobra song. So they're playing, we were going to open. And the radio saying, with opening band, Brat and everything. I was so excited. So that day, they told us to get there at 3 o'clock to set up. We show up right on time, 3 o'clock. We go in there, and Carmine Apiece had this huge drum kit, took up most of the stage. All the amps are set up, everything's ready to go. They're all gone. There's just one roadie there. And I go up to him, or we go up to him, and it's, okay, well, we're Brat, we're the opening band. Are you going to strike the drum set, or you want us to sit up in front? We'll play off the side of the stage. We don't care. What do you want us to do? You're the opening band? I'm like, yeah. And I said, all right, let me call Carmen. He's at the hotel. The guy's right, yeah, the opening band's here. Yeah, opening band. Yeah, there's an opening band. What? Are you sure? All right. He goes, Carmen says to go home. I'm like, excuse me? He goes, Carmen doesn't want an opening band. I'm like, he can't do that. So we go to the manager, of the club, and tell him he is like, well, I don't know. I can't really tell Carmen what to do. Sorry, guys, He goes, I'll make it up to you. You guys can come here tonight for free. I'm like, well, that's really making it up to me, So we're all, really mad. So, I'm the only guy that showed up. The only reason I showed up is this girl I liked. I promised I was going to take her to the show. Her name's Angie, I remember. So I go up the show, and the bad thing is, generally with clubs, they want the headliner to go on late, 12, 1 o'clock, whatever, because they're trying to keep people in the club. These guys go on 9:30, 10 o'clock. They play for like an hour and 15 minutes, and they're gone. Boom. And nobody's, everyone just starts walking out. And so they kind of screwed the club because their liquor sales are gone. And I went there, and all these people are kind of, hey, man, when are you going on stage? I think we had, I'm not going to say more, but a lot of people came to see us. And so anyway, so I'm furious. So, and this bar had a quiet bar. I went to the quiet bar, and sitting by himself was Carmine Apiece. So I give him one of those looks that kills, And he gives me like one of those looks. Wait, what's up, buddy? What are you going to do about it? Yeah, I'm sure you didn't know who I was. But I'm giving him a dirty look, and he's like, no. I wanted to hit him so bad. And I'm not a guy that starts fights. I never wanted to hit a man more in my life. Because the thing is, here's this huge star that just screwed over a local band. Like, he doesn't remember what it's like to get that opportunity, for no reason, unprovoked. I don't know. Just probably because he just didn't, want to play late. So I wanted to go over there and hit him, but something came over me, and I'm like, well, first off, if I start a fight, we might get banned from the club. And then secondly, I might get thrown in jail or sued or worse. I don't know. So I walked away. But just to this day, I'm still not over it. It's just such a cheap, low thing to do to an unknown band for no good reason.
That's disappointing that never happened. And that was one of the few opportunities, as you mentioned, John.
Yeah. That's funny. Yeah, it's like you were aware of that. Because, well, what happened with me is like basically, okay, so I went to art college. I started writing for all these magazines and stuff, and I ended up getting a job as a newspaper printer for the Tampa Tribune newspaper. That was my full-time job. But there's a time that, I put out that Last Word magazine, and and for the Tribune I was writing record reviews. They'd occasionally let me interview. Now, I did get to interview Gene Simmons of Kiss. I interviewed Ronnie James Dio. I interviewed Joey Ramone. I interviewed the guitar player from Queensryche. So I got to interview a bunch of people and stuff. So
I mean, that's not just anyone, right? So especially
yeah.
thinking about one of your heroes and one of your influences of why you picked up a bass in the first place, Gene Simmons. So did that feel any way to you getting a chance to interview him?
When I first, with the Tribune, I mostly wrote record reviews, but I went up to him, and coincidentally, this is when they had the Revenge tour. And they had all the pop albums that didn't do so good. So Revenge was kind of like their heavy metal comeback. They started wearing the leather and heavier songs. And they weren't wearing makeup. They were coincidentally playing Halloween weekend in Tampa. So I went up to, the people that, did, the Tribune. I said, hey, I want to interview Kiss, and they're coming to town. They said, okay. He goes, but it has to be, because it has to be one of the original members, Paul Stanley, Gene Simmons. They didn't want me to introduce the other guys. So I'm like, all right. So I contacted their promotional department, did all these things and stuff. And so I had an interview, a phone interview set up with Paul Stanley, because I thought Paul Stanley was a nice guy. And that one got canceled for whatever reason. So I said, okay, Mr. Urban, I'm sorry, we can't do Paul Stanley, but we're going to make it up for you. We got you scheduled to interview Gene. And I was so afraid that if I talk this guy, if he's a jerk, I'm going to have to go burn all my Kiss records and everything. But I said, all right. So, and it's so cool. The day before, Kiss's road manager calls me up at my house and says, hi, I'm so-and-so, I'm Kiss's road manager. And he's kind of like, okay, so tomorrow I'm going to give you a phone number. You're going to call this number at 3:00 New York time. And it's going to be Gene. Now, the thing is, when you call him, ask to speak to Clark Kent. If you ask for Gene, he'll hang up. And that's important. I'm like, all right, Clark Kent. And then he goes, one thing, man, he goes, don't talk about the makeup. It's like Gene's tired to talk about the makeup. I'm like, okay, Clark Kent, no makeup. I got it. So the next day I call up and I'm nervous, and picks the phone, he's got his gravelly voice, hello. And I'm like, oh, hi, may I speak with Clark Kent? And he's like, may I ask who's speaking? I'm like, oh, this is John Urban with the Tampa Tribune. I got an appointment with Clark Kent. He's like, can you hold on a minute, John? I'm like, yeah, sure. And he did something, came back. Hi, John, this is Gene. How's it going? I'm like, it's like, but the thing is, he was so nice and even humble. He was just very cool. It was so refreshing.
Yeah, that is good to hear that it was a positive experience. You mentioned Joey Ramone too. Were you into punk at all at that time as well?
Not avidly, but I did like the Ramones. I mean, when I was in high school, they had that movie Rock and Roll High School. And I saw that, and they had the big, medley of live stuff. I thought they were great. So,
was there a punk scene going on simultaneously with the hard rock heavy metal scene of the early 80s in Tampa too?
There was one band, oh goodness, it's like, oh yeah, a friend of mine, Robert Wegman, he's one of the virtual type musicians, he's still around, but he played bass for a band called Triple X Girls. And and they kind of wore drag. They makeup and stuff. They were punk and everything. And I remember, this is after Brat. I actually met a band called The Danger, which were a good punk band. I briefly joined them. Didn't work out. But they were, I think that's before Brat. Because my thing is, I kind of want to be a bar band. Honestly, I don't want to work a day job. I just want to go up, be in a bar band and play bars and drink and meet girls, And they said, oh, no, we're going to be original band, only going to play out once a month and all that stuff. So I started, they have really good songs, but it just wasn't what I was wanting. But anyway, but they said, it's like, you want to be Foreigner, forget that. We're going to take you and see a real punk band. So we went to this small venue. I can't remember the name of it. And Triple X Girls was there. And I liked them, like I said, but they wear the eyeliner, Triple X Girls, they kind of wear drag and stuff. and good songs, good band. But it was so funny that there, all of a sudden, a biker gang of punks showed up. And these guys come in with leather and chains wrapped around. And on the back of their jackets, it was Sid's kids. So they kind of worship Sid Vicious. So you got a punk biker gang that's into, Sid Vicious. And they went and they saw him play and everything. And there's this one girl who's with the gang. And these are big. I mean, I'm 6'2". I'm a big guy. These guys were bigger than me. And the singer, remember his name is Mike Knapp, the singer. He goes, "Oh, the next song's a dance song. I want everyone to dance." And this girl, she had like the, what you call the punk things, the hair all over and jacket and stuff. She's kind of cute, but she's with a biker gang. She comes up, "Hey, you want to dance?" And all the gang comes and looks at me. And I'm like, "I don't know." She goes, "He said to dance." I'm like, "All right." So I went there and I danced and 1 or 2 times, and then I was okay. If I said no, it probably would have killed me. You don't think, what I do? Do I dance? Shall I stay or shall I go? But yeah, that was my punk story. But there was that one time period in the early 90s where I was kind of a big fish in a small pond, that I was writing for the Tampa Tribune and other magazines. So I was writing, and I was booking bands. There's a big club that came after my time. The club, ever hear of the Rocket Club?
Definitely.
Okay. Again, what should I say? They had an owner there that was real cutthroat, named Fred Goldbaugh. And he was always ripping off people and stuff. But I was, because I had my own board called The Last Word. Then I started writing for a bigger magazine called Music Magazine. But I still used The Last Word name as my article. Then I wrote for another magazine called Thrust Magazine that still used Last Word. So after I was using The Last Word for like 2 or 3 years, I decided to have a concert there and get all these friends of mine that I knew were in big bands. They're all going to play for free. I went up to Fred, "Hey, I want to have a gig that promote, me being having The Last Word for like 2 or 3 years, whatever it was." And he goes, "Well, how much to pay for he was from another country. He said, "How much for the bands? How much you charge me?" And I'm like, "No, the bands are friends of mine. They'll play it for free." "Well, what do you want out of it?" "I don't want anything. I just want to do it." He's like, "Really?" So, we go there. The place was packed. It's like, and everything. And I'm going up jamming with the bands and everything. So he offered me a job. And so I booked bands there for about a year. So during that time period, yeah. So during that time period, people remember me from being in Brat. I was a writer, so all these musicians, it got to the point I didn't know who my friends were, because all these bands were kissing my what, because I could get them gigs, I could write about them, do all these things. So for a while, I was like, like I said, a fish in a small pond. And so I'd go out with my friends and my family and stuff. And the one thing I left out, also, there is a local public access show that they would bring me on, and I would do skits and stuff, and I'd promote my magazine. So at 2:00 in the morning there, I was on TV, and I thought they'd show me once or twice. They showed me all the time.
Wow.
And I started getting recognized.
Yeah.
And I'm with some friends of mine, and people would say, "Oh, there's John Urban." And he goes, "How'd they know him?" I said, "Well, I'm famous, And so my friends,
John Urban.
That's where it started, because it started out as an inside joke. People started calling me Famous John, and then that became a nickname. And so then from the magazines, just for a joke, I started calling myself Famous John Urban. And that started in 1987. And so now I'm writing all these Bigfoot books. That's why I'm Famous John Urban. And really the reason I do that, there's other Famous John Urbans, but if you Google Famous John Urban, I'll pop up, so that's one of the reasons I do it. I've actually had some people kind of, "Oh, Famous John Urban, you're really full of yourself, blah, blah, blah." I'm like, "No, it's a joke, but like, whatever." Sure. I've used this since 1987, give me a break. Yeah. In the early days, when the drinking age was 19, they had all the big clubs, and they had 2 different radio stations, 98 and 95 1F and 98 Rock, and they would compete with each other. And the thing is, I remember, knock on wood, I quit drinking not too long ago. So when I went up to Atlanta for 3.5 years, when I came back, one of the radio stations closed down, and then the other radio stations started jacking up their commercials. So a lot of because back in the 80s, when I was in this one, wrote for this magazine called Thrust Magazine. We'd promote the bands, the local bands, and people knew the names of the guys in the band and the songs and everything else like that. and they're on the radio all the time. One station, 98 Rock, on Sundays, they play local bands all night. There's just all this thing. They promote the scene, everything. The DJs would go out to the clubs, all these things. And it just went to hell, when I came back from Atlanta, it was just dead. And then the other thing is the two things that hurt the scene was kind of when, the whole thing, everyone blames like grunge and rap and all that stuff. But their industrial music started getting big. There got to be two clubs. I think one's called DNA and the other is called something else, 911. But they would have no bands. They'd have DJs, but they'd have like $5 sink or swim nights and stuff like that. So all the people stopped going to the Rocket Club and stuff. They started going to there. And then also a lot of the girls, they started going to country clubs. They like to line dance and stuff. So, I mean, it used to be like the Rocket Club would have 500 people throughout the night, whoever, regardless who was playing there. Then you go there on a Friday night and see 20 people. It's just, the scene just really died overnight. Well, I remember when I came back there, I went to a bar I used to go to that didn't normally have bands. And one of the bands that was really popular, there were a couple bands. There's one called St. Warren that they started out as a Christian rock band, but they were close to getting signed. Really, they had two brothers, the Warren brothers, and they ended up getting signed as country artists because they became songwriters. So they wrote for Faith Hill and all these people and stuff. But that band was popular. But there's a band called Bleeding Hearts that they would actually play their songs on the radio. Because this 98 Rock, certain songs like this band Heartless, that Kenny McGee guy was in Lefty, and Bleeding Hearts and stuff, they play their songs during the day, not just in, late at night or whatever. But that Bleeding Hearts band, I go there and all of a sudden these guys, Earl and Archie, they were in this Bleeding Hearts band. They're there and there's like 10, 15 people there. And they're like the top band, And I asked them what happened. He said, well, ever since 98 Rock or one of the labels, radio stations went under and stuff, and, it's like the bands our clubs just stopped advertising.
I think there was a member of St. Warren who had also played with another band called Scarlet, who had played at least one show with Brat.
Oh, my God. I'm good friends with Scarlet. As a matter of fact, I even produced one of their demos at Morrisound.
Really?
Scarlet was a Christian rock band. And Jeff McDonald, and one of my best friends is Ronnie Lewis, that was a bass player. He's one of my best friends. He does acoustic acts. And yeah, Scarlet, they had some interest getting signed. And I like Scarlet. They were, what happened was, it's going back to my Power Surge friends. Me and Jimbo, the singer, since Morrisound, the recording studio is so expensive, I worked lawn maintenance. And so I kind of went up to him and said, hey, I see your lawn's getting kind of shaggy here. It's like, what if I mow your yard in exchange for studio time? So, and I was in that band Record with Jimbo from Power Surge. So we did that for a while and everything. But basically that band didn't work out. So I had some studio time. And I went and saw my friend in Scarlet, and they're playing, and something just came over me. And I thought, oh, it's God telling me, I think I'm going to give them my studio time. It's because there's one song they had I like. So I took them to the studio and I paid for it. Producer and demo, but yeah.
Interesting. There's always these connections. The more we talk, the more we uncover more of this. So I think that's fantastic. And it's just been so cool getting a chance to sit down with you and hear a lot of your stories and going back to the early beginnings to all the highs and the lows. And it's just so great to get a chance to hear your story. And so thank you, John, for taking that time to do this. It's appreciated.
Well, like I said, I have fond memories of it and stuff. And it's just really the whole lesson. That's one thing. When I was in Brat, we rehearsed 5 nights a week religiously. We were best friends, everything, we voted things fairly and everything. It just, when it happened towards the end, when Atlantic Records was interested, when that temptation came in, certain people started backstabbing people that, and that's the thing, we just all stayed together, stuck to our guns and looked out for each other, we would have been fine, and I still think we should have gotten Metal Blade Records, but whatever. But yeah, I mean, I'm over it now and everything is disappointing, but the whole point of it is these two individuals, they were team players and it never would have worked out with them, so just kind of like, and I mean, I remember one time I was going to art school. And I went to the recording when actually, as a matter of fact, I like my props. When I was doing my Urban Vault CD, I needed to get the reel-to-reel transfer to CD so I can get the CDs reproduced. So I went to Morrisound Studios. The owner, Tom Morris, was there. So he did that for me. And he told me, he goes, yeah. I said, whatever happened to Brat? He goes, they broke up and everything. And he said, it was sad because Poison recorded one of their albums there, some about dog eat dog or something, I forget. But it was one of their, when they were kind of getting not so popular anymore, kind of. But Poison was going to record at Morrisound, and Morrisound had to get like a brand new board. They had all these demands, but they went there, and the manager of Poison, this Tom Morris guy was trying to do the shopping for Brat. He played him the Brat CD, but the Brat wasn't a band. They didn't have a bass player drummer at the time. It was just the two guys. He said, okay, I'm interested in managing Brat. I just want to see him first. Try to have him put together 8 songs, and I'll go see him, and I'll like him, I'll book him. And so he said, okay, well, try to get a couple guys, learn 8 songs, and I'll set up. He goes, it seems like too much work. If they had called me, I would have done it. But you're telling me you got the manager of Brat, but it's too much work to try to get a couple guys to learn 8 songs. It's just like, here's an opportunity. It's like, it's just that they just didn't want to put in the work,
Yeah.
So it was sad.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. And at the very least, those that have fond memories of that period who had a chance to see Brat, the music that's still available out there that people can check out. Those are the things that are tangible that we can revisit. And it's so nice that we now have this episode as well that people can check out too. So as we get ready to close things out, John, I'd like to give you the last word. That's one of your bits as well. Any final thoughts you'd like to share to the folks out there? The floor is yours to take us home.
Yeah. Well, basically, like I said, I got my little Bigfoot playing poker art. I was just a couple of plugs. I mean, I do have a signature series of all my Bigfoot playing poker art on SasquatchTheLegend.com. So if you go to SasquatchTheLegend.com and just do a search under Famous John Urban, I'll pop up. But the main thing is I have my 2 books in Showtime. So I got my Famous Bigfoot and Yeti Encounters coloring book. Now what this is, it's like an illustrated history of all the famous pictures or stories of Bigfoot. So, and then I got my Goldilocks versus the 3 Bigfoot book. They're on Amazon. So if you go to Amazon, just Google under Famous John Urban, my books will pop up. So if you want to check that out, if you're interested in Bigfoot, I would appreciate it. That's all it. So I appreciate you bringing me on. It's all good. Thanks.